So in the past 3 years or so, I've read over 30 global politics books, and global politics books are for the most part good or decent, but there have been some rotten eggs among the pile of them. And I'm gonna have a rule in this video where I limit myself to one book per author, otherwise half this list would be made up of Peter Zian books. With that said, let's get into the list, starting at number 5 with The 20 Years Crisis by E.H. Carr. So this is actually the oldest geopolitics book I think I've reviewed on this channel. It was written back in 1939, and it's an introduction to classical realism, you could say. And there are several problems I have with this book. This author rejects that there are objective universal facts, and he also believes that politics have primacy over economics and determines how economics work, and he rejects the idea that there are policies that can actually be beneficial to everyone in trade or in international relations. But I have a problem with his thesis, because if we have a world where we determine our differences through war instead of trade, then everyone loses. He actually thinks that, oh no, it is justified for aggressive powers to go to war to resolve their issues, which it is not. It's quite clear when you read this book that E.H. Carr is a socialist who rejects capitalism and free trade. So some of the time when you read this book, you forget that it's an international relations book, and instead it turns into a critique of free trade and capitalism. Now he claims to believe in reality, but at the same time, if you reject facts, how can you believe in reality? So this is probably the worst mainstream realist book I've ever read. Next up on the list, I have Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, which claims to be a brief history of tomorrow. Now, my problem with this book is the collectivist determinist mindset that Yuval Noah Harari has. So he rejects the idea that humans have free will. Instead, he thinks that we're just biochemical compositions and that there are algorithms within us that determine how we act. And he also believes that, oh, humans are gonna give up privacy freely. No one's gonna resist or anything, and that you're also gonna have some divergence between superhumans that are genetically modified through technology and then everyone else who's screwed and poor. Which his thesis doesn't make sense, because if free will doesn't exist, then how could he have consciously thought about writing this book? His book is a walking contradiction when you just think about it a little. And he also claims that, oh, fascism and socialism, there's not anything objectively wrong with them. And that, oh, liberalism took from them the good aspects. Which, no, I believe, like some classical liberals believe, that liberalism today has partially been corrupted by socialism and fascism. So no, we didn't take the good aspects from them. If we fought an ideological war with them, that means we thought they were universally bad. So yeah, of the books I have on this list, this is the most anti-individualistic one included here. So if you're a person who believes in human volition and the capacity of humans to think freely, then probably you won't like this book, Homo Deus, same as I don't like it. The next book on this list is The Road to Unfreedom by Timothy Schneider. So there are a few positive aspects on this book when I reflect back on it. So I was too harsh on my initial review on it, kind of 3 years ago, which I reviewed in Swedish. However, my point still stands for the most part. So he's partially right on the ideological fascist mindset of Putin's Russia and how their ideology is based on Igor Ilyin and other thinkers, and that yes, they want to create a greater Russian power, which includes Belarus and Ukraine. But then he goes off the rails by claiming that, oh, Brexit, that happened because of the Russians. Oh, Trump's election, that happened because of the Russians. Oh, Trump is just like Putin. Oh, Trump is Putin's puppet. So this book evolves from a decent book on the perverseness of Russian policy to just a book that hates the American and European right and thinks of them as fascists and Nazis who are sympathetic to Russia, and that any time that someone who's friendly to the EU or left loses an election, then that's a threat to democracy. This is just a book that fearmongers and encourages you to hate the Western right. Which, yeah, you can criticize it, but there's a difference between criticizing your opposition and saying that they're basically idiots or evil or sympathetic to Russia and fascism and Nazism. This book to a certain extent disgusts me because it contributes to the polarization between the left and the right we have right now in the West, and it encourages the left to hate the right and not listen to their arguments at all. And of course, someone on the right who reads this book, you're gonna see this book as a caricature on themselves, and this is written by someone who's clearly a leftist, so of course they're not gonna want to discuss with the left when a leftist like him accuses them directly of being a fascist. This is just a book that insidiously contributes to the polarization of politics in the West, and ironically actually helps Russia's power position as it further divides us in the West. Coming in at number 2, we have the next 100 years. So the next 100 years claims to accurately, more or less, predict what's gonna happen in the 21st century. But already some of the predictions by George Friedman here up to the 2020s have been wrong. So he's claimed that, oh, China will collapse. China has not collapsed. China is still a growing economic juggernaut. And he also thinks that there's gonna be some war between Turkey and Japan on one side and Poland and the United States on another, which no, because these are all American allies who all have, to a certain extent, a committee of interests against Russia and China. So there's some decent analysis of green energy in this book and how, oh, the war on terror is actually declining in importance. But otherwise, this geopolitics book is a waste of your time. Coming in at number 1 is Disunited Nations by Peter Zeihan. Now, Peter Zeihan is a thought-provoking yet slightly crazy author at times. The Accidental Superpower, that's a decent book, but Disunited Nations is the worst way you could waste money on buying a book. Disunited Nations is basically a book that just rehashes what he said in Absent Superpower and Accidental Superpower in more words, less concisely, with very little new information. So that's why I don't like that book. Because he just repeats what he said in previous books and pretends that it's new content, but it isn't. And of course you have the fact that Peter Zeihan's predictions for the most part are bogus. While it is true that America is not in decline, it's untrue that the world is just going to hell right now, and that you're gonna have massive new wars soon, and that you're gonna have the rise of new empires, and that we're just gonna return to how history was a few hundred years ago. Which no, you cannot compare how the world is now really to how the world was a few hundred years ago. We're in a different dynamic. Peter Zeihan thinks our golden age is over. That might be true, but that doesn't mean we're entering into another dark age. We're just entering into another period where we keep growing, probably, maybe stagnate a little, grow a little less slowly, but we're not gonna have huge declines for the most part, apart in a few nations specifically maybe. So yeah, those were the top 5 worst global politics books I have read so far. And having read these books, I have no longer any interest in reading any more geopolitics or global politics books by these authors. So there probably won't ever be again, although never say never, a review on a book by Peter Zeihan or George Friedman or Yuval Noah Harari or Timothy Schneider or E.H. Carr. Now, if you want to know actually about 5 geopolitics books that are worth reading, then you can check out this playlist of geopolitics books worth reading. Otherwise, I'm the Avid Reader, and I will see you readers next time.